I studied here, and it gave me a lot in terms of knowledge, in terms of understanding. So it's quite a big deal for me to be standing here. I've sat there. I'd like to thank the Judge Business School, the Dean, the faculty and students, and I'd especially like to thank Professor Rao for having me here. I thought I would speak a little bit about India, about what is going on in India, and that's the Bharat Jodo bit. And then I would talk about two divergent perspectives on the planet, the American view of things, the Chinese view of things, and how those two are playing out. And then I'd conclude by placing some ideas on the table about how we can think about these two divergent forces. The central thread is about listening, and it's about listening at the individual level, but also listening politically at scale. So not just one person, but listening to millions and millions of people and understanding how they're feeling and how they're responding. Okay? And then also listening to different cultures, which you're not maybe used to or I'm not used to, and trying to get a sense of how they're seeing the world, and trying to piece together where they're coming from. So the broad idea is one of listening. Different cultures listen differently. There's a very specific way in which the Indian culture listens, and so I'll be talking more about that. I see a friend of mine, a Sikh friend of mine. You'll sort of get a sense of what I'm talking about. And it's also about what is going on at the international level and the risks that are potentially in front of us. Okay, so we can start with the Bharat Jodo. Everybody knows, and it's been in the news a lot, that Indian democracy is under pressure, is under attack. Right? I'm an opposition leader in India, and we're navigating that space. What's happening? The institutional framework, which is required for a democracy, parliament, the free press, the judiciary, just the idea of mobilization, just the idea of moving around, these are all getting constrained. So we are facing an attack on the basic structure of Indian democracy. In the Constitution, India is described as a union of states, and that union requires a negotiation, requires a conversation. So it's slightly different than other countries. You can think about it much more at the scale of Europe, right? Multiple different states, much bigger than Europe, requiring a conversation and a negotiation to actually move forward. And it's that negotiation that is actually coming under attack and under threat, right? Here you can see that picture. That picture is taken in front of Parliament House, and that's where a whole bunch of opposition members of Parliament were just standing there talking about certain issues, and we were just locked up and put in jail. And that's happened 3 or 4 times, right? And it's happened relatively violently. That's just an example. And you've also heard of the attack on minorities, the attack on the press. So you get a sense of what is going on. Now, the one way I like to think about it is that Indian democracy is a public good, okay? Because it is by far the biggest democracy. At least 50% of people who live in a democratic space live in India. And so preserving and defending Indian democracy is more than just about India. It's actually about defending the democratic structure and the democratic system on the planet, right? Can we do the next slide? So that's what I described: capture and control of media and the judiciary, surveillance and intimidation. I myself had Pegasus on my phone. Large number of politicians have Pegasus on on their phone. I've been called by intelligence officers who tell me, listen, please be careful what you're saying on the phone, because we are sort of recording this stuff. So this is a constant pressure that we feel. Cases on opposition. I've got a number of criminal libel cases for things that should under no circumstances be criminal libel cases, but that's the story, right? And that's what we're trying to defend. What we found as the opposition was that it's very difficult to communicate with people when you have this type of an assault on the media, on the democratic architecture. Can you go to the next slide? And so we decided to go back into Indian history and Indian culture, and we decided to use a very powerful tool that has been used in Indian history called the Yatra. And that's Mahatma Gandhi doing a Yatra against the British, which actually broke the back of the British Empire. It's called the Dandi Yatra. My Indian friends here will know about it. And it was a Yatra that raised the issue of a salt tax. It was about 450 kilometers. The idea of a Yatra is not just a journey, right? It's a journey, it's a conversation, it's listening to people, but at its heart, it's the idea of annihilating yourself. So at the heart of a Yatra is the idea that you attack yourself, and you attack yourself by the distance that you walk, by the pressure you put yourself under, and that's the basic philosophy of a Yatra. And the idea is that if you attack yourself and you shut yourself down, you shut your ideas down, then when someone speaks to you, you will be able to listen to him or her more effectively. That's the broad philosophical idea behind it, and it's there in a number of religious systems as well as an idea. The idea of attacking yourself, of annihilating yourself to understand, to observe, to listen. And it also has to have a sense of perseverance. It can't be that you just do it for 5 days. It's got to hurt you. It's got to be long, and it's got to take time. Can we do the next one? And so that's the Yatra that we started. It started from Kanyakumari in the south, and it went all the way to Srinagar. 5 months, well actually 4.5 months of continuous walking, 4,000 kilometers, 14 states, 136 days, 9 languages, multiple religions. Next slide. And so we started on this. We decided, okay, we're going to do this. We got 125 core people, and we said, okay, we start to walk. And we had no idea, frankly, what we were getting ourselves into. Okay, because I'm a runner, so for me, I thought to myself, look, okay, we're walking 30 kilometers a day. I run 10 easily, so 30 can't be that difficult, right? A little bit of arrogance. So I was like, this is not going to be a big deal. And so we started. And immediately we realized what we had got ourselves into, okay? Because this was not actually about the distance at all, right? The distance was almost irrelevant. It was about the energy that was embedded in this thing, right? And the number of people, the scale of the thing, spiraled completely out of control. So it went, in our imagination, it was 120 people walking with, 3,000, 2,000 people coming sometimes. This became 50, 100,000 people. And when you get 50, 100,000 people next to you, it's not easy because you are just thrown around, right? And the forces are very, very big. To give you an idea, 6 people died, okay, walking this thing. Multiple people broke their legs, arms, and that was the type of energy that was released. What I did early on, I thought to myself, okay, so what is my responsibility in this? What do I have to do? And I came out with the concept, which was that when we're walking and there's this massive group of people and this pressure, I have to ensure that the space in front of me is safe, right? Whether it's a woman who comes, whether it's a young kid who comes, whether it's a handicapped person, whoever comes, that person's got to feel that I'm comfortable, and in this huge energetic system, I'm safe. That was my first idea. And the second idea was, which I told the guys working with us, I said that, look, whoever comes into this space must feel that they've come home, right? They should not feel that this is a political rally. They should feel that they've come to see there were many of us, so they've come to see their brother, or they've come to see their sister, or they've come to see their mother, and they should feel very comfortable over there. And then when they leave, they should have a feeling that I just left home. So we try to make it a personal, emotional connect with people. That was just an idea, and that's the idea here of creating this listening space. Can we do the next one? And that's what the thing looks like, right? And that's so you can see the space around me there, and there's others who are walking with me over there. There you can't really see it. And so there's massive pressure coming into that space, right? And these people are walking, and then we are inviting them into the space, and we're having these conversations, which interestingly, the moment we come up with the idea of making it a home, they stop being political discussions. So what was a political idea suddenly became a personal idea, right? And we started getting people who started talking to us about things that we never imagined that they would speak about, right? Just completely as a politician, we're used to saying, okay, let's talk about employment, let's talk about, these type of things. And suddenly we were getting this emotional outburst of people telling us the most personal things. When you meet somebody, especially when you're a politician, the first thing you're trying to do is you're trying to tell them that you understand their situation, right? And even in business, that's the first thing you're trying to say. Look, I know what your problem is. I know how to solve your problem. That's the starting point. So when I began, that was my idea. Somebody had come to me and I'm a farmer. Oh yeah, your problem is, with the seeds, and your problem is, the fact that you're not getting your insurance money, etc. These type of things. And very quickly that just stopped, because the number of people that we were dealing was just too much. And the pain, then what also started to happen was my knee started to give me trouble. I had an old injury in college which had gone away, and then suddenly that thing started up, right? So in my mind, I was like, okay, I got to make sure that this is under control. And frankly, there's not much I can say now. And I just got to listen to everybody. And so what slowly started to happen is that my desire to speak just started to die, right? One, because I couldn't speak to so many people, and two, because I was in pain and I was just like, okay, I got to cruise through this thing, right? I'd get up in the morning. I mean, you can imagine it. You have knee pain, and you're like, okay, so how many kilometers do I got to go? 3,500. I mean, how do you even come to terms with that, right? You're like, my God, right? So this is, as I was dealing with this, I started to sort of go silent, right? And so I would speak to somebody. It would be as if I was like a dark lake. I'd just be sitting there and silently, and the person would be speaking to me. And slowly I started to feel many things that I could not feel before, right? So for example, a farmer would come, he'd grab my hand, and immediately when I grabbed his hand, I could tell the suffering that he's been through, the pain that he's been through, the difficulty he's been through. So you started to hear, not just with your ears, you start to hear with your hands, you start to listen with your eyes, you started to look, you're walking with somebody and you can see that he's struggling. So you start to get a sense of what this person is and where he's coming from. Very, very deep sense of that. I'll give you the most shocking example of this, and I said that these discussions started becoming very personal. So we're walking and suddenly these two, and how you can hear in an individual, right, the voice of millions of people. Right? That's what, as a politician, I think about. How do I take what you're saying and say, okay, how do I now take it from there to what a million ladies are saying, or a million women are saying, or what you're feeling, how do I translate it to what a million or 500,000 women are saying? So I'm walking, and suddenly these two girls come, one of them grabs my hand on this side, and the other one grabs my hand on this side. And when they grab my hand, I feel something I've never felt before, right, in their hand. I'm like, this is strange. The way they're holding my hand, there's something strange in it, right? It's like, almost like a desperate way of holding my hand. So I look at the girl and I say, tell me, what's happened? How are you doing? And she looks at me and she says, well, my sister and me, that's the sister, were gang raped by 5 guys. So this is not a personal conversation that you have with somebody you've just met. So I'm like, look, let's call the cops. Right? That's my first reaction. I'm like, that's a real problem. Let's call the cops. And they're like, no, please don't call the cops. You can't call the cops. So why can't I call the cops? And they're like, well, if you call the cops, we'll be shamed. And then the girl says, and I'll never be able to get married. So I said, what do you want me to do? They're like, don't call the cops. So I was like, okay, so then what do I do? If I don't call the cops, how do I help you? They're like, no, we just wanted our brother to know what has happened to us. And I said, yeah, you've told your brother what's happened to you, but now what do I do? And there's nothing you can do. And then they walked away, right? So now you extrapolate that, and you can see thousands of women who have faced something like that, and you can see the pain that is there hidden. You can see the difficulty that they're dealing with. The other thing they said, the other thing I thought when they walked away, I was like, my God. So these girls have dealt with this, and now they're going to deal with it for the rest of their life, and they're never going to tell anybody. Right? And I thought, that's crazy, but that's it, right? So these are the type of things that started to happen, and they started to change, as a politician, the way I look at people and the way I think about people and the way I react to people, right? Almost like a silence in me. There is just, okay, say what you have to say, and I'm quiet, and there's nothing I'm going to say, and tell me everything you have to say, right? And then once you've told me, I'm not telling anybody, right? Which is trust. So that's what this yatra started to do, and it started to happen with kids. I'm walking I'm walking, and just to give you a flavor of India, I'm walking, and there are these little beggars who come, little kids, and they come and they hug me and stuff. So I'm fooling around with them, and another man comes and says, "Don't do that." So don't do what? He's like, "Don't touch them." I said, "Why?" He says, "They're dirty." So I said, "No, you and me are dirtier than them, right?" So you can see then these ideas that are floating around that suddenly you never heard them before. You never heard, or you didn't get the granularity of it anyway. And then can we go to the next? Yeah. So that's a Sikh mechanic. You can see his hand there, and this is a girl whose house has been broken, whose house I think has been smashed. Anyway, next. Now this is where the thing gets really interesting. So we are going through all the states, and Kashmir is a state which is insurgency prone, right? There's a lot of violence. There's been quite a lot of violence for many years. In fact, that picture there is me putting flowers on the spot where almost 40 soldiers were killed by a car bomb some years back. So we arrive in Kashmir, and Kashmir is this so-called violent place. And as I'm entering Kashmir, the security guys come to me and say, "Listen, we need to talk to you." So what do you need to say? And they say, "Well, look, the thing is, you can't walk in Kashmir, right? It's not a good idea. We're walking 3 days, and we're walking 3 days in the roughest districts. So you can't walk in Kashmir. It's a bad idea." So I'm like, "Why can't I walk in Kashmir?" And they're like, "Well, because you'll get hand grenades thrown on you." So now I'm responsible for 120 people I'm walking with, right? So I'm like, "Look, let me go and have a little word with them." And so I go and have a little word with them and say, "Look, they're telling us they're going to get hand grenades thrown at us." And they're like, "Okay." And I was like, frankly, I want to walk. I mean, if we get hand grenades, we get hand grenades. So they're like, "Yeah, we should all walk." And so we decided we're going to walk. And we start to walk. And suddenly what starts to happen is these Indian flags start coming everywhere, right? Everywhere, they just start coming out, right? The first day we're told about 2,000 people are going to show up, and 40,000 people show up, right? And that thing over there, when I'm sitting on that Jeep, is because the police and security system just been overloaded and it's collapsed, right? Because they can't manage the crowd. And if you look carefully, you'll see the panic on the security people's faces. Anyway, they pull us out of that and say, "This just doesn't work. We can't go through this in this manner." And then the next day they set it up properly, and then we go through. That's us entering Kashmir where the mountains are. That's on the first day. And then the really interesting thing happens. So we've been told we're going to be killed. We're walking, and people are coming, and then one guy looks at me and he says, "Call me." So I'm like, "Come." And the security people said, "Listen, please don't do this. Please don't call people. Like, we walk here, don't call people, because this is putting everybody at risk." So the guy says, "Call me." I say, "Come." So he comes. Starts walking next to me, and he says, "Mr. Gandhi, you've come here to listen to us?" So I'm like, "Yes." So he's like, "That's interesting." He's like, "You really come here to listen to us?" And I'm like, "Yes." So he's like, "Good." And then he says, "You see those guys over there?" And we're walking. And he says, "You see those guys over there?" And I'm like, "Yes." Who? He's like, "Those boys over there." And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "The militants." Right? Now, militants should normally kill me. In that environment, militants should kill me. And he says, "They're there. And they're looking at you." So I look at them, and they give me this sort of, I'm serious, they give me this sort of look. And I'm like, okay, I'm now in trouble, right? Because this guy's just told me this. They give me this look, and I give them this look back, and then we carry on. Nothing happens, right? And why I'm telling you this is because they actually couldn't do anything. They actually didn't have the power to do anything, even if they wanted to. Because I had come into that environment listening. And I had come into that environment completely with no violence in me at all. And the vast number of people there were seeing that, right? So that to me was an indicator of the power of listening and nonviolence. Now, what did we hear in India? The main thing, we heard that, and this you don't hear in the media. In the media, you have a completely different discourse going on. You have Bollywood, you have cricket, you have all sorts of other stuff. What we heard in India is, the main thing we heard is unemployment. That India is simply not producing the jobs its youngsters need, period, the end. And that's everybody, all the young people, okay? So I want to leave you with that. Now, let's go to the next. So now, let's move to two divergent ideas that are there are many ideas, but the two that are big and the two that are powerful and playing out, the idea of the United States and the idea of China. And we know that the United States is the dominant superpower, global superpower, and it's had a record since the 1940s of enabling large amount of prosperity and growth. Okay, and it's done that in a democratic environment. It used to produce, and it used to produce in a democratic framework, and that's quite an important thing in my view. The history of the United States, everybody knows. People went from Europe, people went from England because they were persecuted. So the idea of individual freedom is very, very deep in America. And the Americans, at least with their citizens, will protect that idea very firmly and very strongly. Right? And the other idea that's central to America is the idea of openness, the idea that anybody can come into America and anybody can dream the American dream. I was educated there, and I remember being surprised at how open it was. I'll give you an anecdote. My father had just died and I had been killed, and I was in America in college, and I was a bit upset, so my guardian told me to come from Boston to Atlanta. And I remember 3 or 4 in the morning I got up, took the cab to Logan Airport, and there was a Haitian taxi driver, and I started talking to him, and he said, you know, America's given me my life. America has given me everything I have. I had nothing in Haiti, and I came here, and they love me, and they treat me with respect. And I'm part of the American dream. And then I walked out to on the curb, and as I was walking out, I pulled my suitcase out, and there was a guy standing there, and he had these suitcases in front of him. So he said, which airline are you flying? And I was a bit suspicious. I was like, why is this stranger asking me which airline am I flying? And anyway, I hesitated, and I told him, and he said, oh, you can do curbside check-in. And I was, what's that? And he's like, well, you can just leave your bags here. Now, for me, this was just like a mind-blowing idea, right? Like, I leave my bags here? Okay. So I was like, no. He's like, no, you can leave your bags here. So I was like, okay, so who are you? And so he pulls out his airline ID. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And I leave the bags. And then I walk off. I remember asking myself, when are these guys going to check my ID? Right? I had a passport and my college ID. And when are they going to check my ID? And they didn't check my ID. They didn't check my ID right into the plane. This was pre-9/11, so maybe a lot of you guys don't remember this, haven't felt this, but I was like, what's going on, right? And why are these guys not checking this ID? In my own country, they check my ID, right? They'll ask me for the passport immediately, and here they're not. What is going on? And I remember sitting on the plane saying, my God, this is an amazing place. I've come here a few months ago, and they've let me through the airport, they've not checked me, and they trust me, they believe in me, right? And to me, those two ideas are the core of the idea of America. They will make you feel comfortable, and they will protect you. Okay, in America. In America, not outside America often. Okay, outside America, they can do bad things to you sometimes, but in America, they will.